Hello and welcome to the May edition of the Hey Legal Social. We are once again live on YouTube and Twitter. And since launching this live stream in January, we've had roughly 3,000 viewers of the social watching our content from different platforms. So thank you to our guests and everyone who's watching. We are delighted you're joined tonight. And hello also to those who watch this on catch up. Our YouTube channel has just passed the 80,000 view mark, which is just incredible. So welcome and thank you. So as usual, we have another packed schedule and some really great guests tonight. And tonight our theme is taking action to make positive change. So we plan to start by talking about action being taken, first of all, by court lawyers in protests at current circumstances. And later on, we'll be joined by Jonathan Kennett, who is a health expert and owner of the Health Hub in Quarriers Village. And he's going to be discussing staying well and dealing with the stresses of professional life in this, which is Mental Health Awareness Week, but specifically how lawyers can stay healthy, have a good mindset, well-being, those sort of things. So we're looking forward to hearing from Jonathan. Again, we would love for you to be involved in this live stream. So please do send your comments or questions via the live chat if you're watching on YouTube. And we thank again our sponsors, De Novo, the Cash Room and Bundle Docs. Thank you all for your support. So let's get started. And to kickstart our discussions, I am joined, first of all, by Darryl Lovie of Keegan Smith Defence Lawyers, the award-winning criminal law firm of the year. And Darryl is also a committee member of the Scottish Solicitors Bar Association. Easy for me to say, Darryl. Hello, how are you?
I'm very well. Good evening to you.
Good evening. And we are also being joined this evening. We're very privileged because it was, let me tell you, it was touch and go for a wee while, but we have criminal barrister Lucie Wibberley of Garden Court Chambers. And Lucie is Secretary of the Criminal Bar Association of England and Wales. And she's joined us from south of the border tonight. So welcome, Lucie. We're really grateful to you for coming along tonight. And we know you've got a stressful schedule like many of us at the moment, so really pleased that you could make it. So perhaps I could come.
It's lovely to see you again.
Oh, you too, Lucie. Thank you. We did a video previously with, it was a kind of international video, which was really interesting. So I'm sure you're going to enjoy tonight just as much. So thanks again for coming along. So we'll start perhaps, Darryl, with you. And people are aware, I'm sure, that action, and quite radical, I suppose, action is being taken, is having to be taken. So could you maybe start by explaining what action is being taken just now?
Yeah, of course. Well, some time ago, a decision was made by the profession to withdraw their services insofar as the duty scheme was concerned. Which in itself was a fairly radical step. That has very closely been followed by the decision to refuse to accept court appointments in cases where an individual accused don't have a solicitor. And as of the 3rd of May, another radical decision, one that we thought long and hard about as a profession, is to refuse to accept instructions in relation to summary complaints where the accused is entitled to legal aid and the accused faces a charge under Section 1 of the Domestic Abuse Scotland Act. That, as I say, is a radical step and not one that we took lightly, because we know as defence lawyers that we are there to protect the interests of accused. And it's very difficult for us to refuse instructions in cases such as these, because we know that that decision not only affects the accused, it affects everyone involved in the case, including the victim or alleged victim. So these types of cases were chosen specifically because they perfectly demonstrate where we are in terms of the expectation on us to prepare and execute the defence of an accused person on a summary fixed fee, which frankly doesn't even push the sides, because these particular types of cases, more often than not, have a fairly extensive latitude in relation to the libel, and very often are in reality 9, 10, 11 charges in one. So it's impossible, frankly, on what we are being paid to properly defend these types of cases.
And so you've obviously thought long and hard, and as you've said, it's not a light decision that's been made, but it's one that hopes, I suppose, to make an impact. And as you say, these types of cases can be very large charges, which may have really serious allegations amongst them, and take a lot of time to prepare, present. So was the thinking that it both demonstrated the commitment in terms of workload, but also the fact that solicitors are essential to these types of cases, and without them, it maybe demonstrates how the criminal justice system might look going forward if things are not addressed?
Absolutely. And the true test will come in maybe 3 months' time when the trials fixed in these cases as of 3rd May start to come round. But the other reason that we chose that particular type of case is that, of course, accused persons are not allowed to represent themselves facing charges such as these for quite good and proper reason. And we also knew that having again made the decision to refuse to accept court appointments, that the public defender simply wouldn't be in a position to properly cope with the aftermath of our decision, particularly when we knew that the public defender's office are already struggling and swamped because they are now constantly on duty because we are no longer doing that. And we also knew that the court could not enforce an appointment on any solicitor, whether that be public defender or a private solicitor. So we knew that this would bring the appropriate pressure to bear.
Yeah.
And we hope that the government is watching and will take note and will listen and take action accordingly.
Yeah. I suppose I'm sure people watching this are aware of why the action's been taken, but what is the acute need, Darryl? Can you articulate, why this action is being taken? Why have things got to this point, or how have things got to this point?
I've got to admit, it's partly our own fault. This is not a new problem. The legal aid system has been in terminal decline for decades. The level of the fixed fee in 1999 is roughly the same as it is now. We all know the job is considerably more difficult now than it was in 1999. But what we have found is that whereas previously the profession was somewhat fractured, that COVID has effectively united us, because it really brought to the fore just how difficult our circumstances are in trying to do the job that we are passionate about doing. We are there to protect the interests of the vulnerable, to provide them with a voice, And yet traditionally we have been woefully inadequate in terms of protecting our own interests and having our own voice heard. But that's changing. That's changing because we are now at a point where we are in a proper full-blown crisis. The pace is relentless, the pressure is unbearable, and we simply can't cope. You go into any courtroom at the moment and you will look to the right at the defence lawyer and it will be a white male in his 50s. And you look to the left at the deputy and it will be a female in her late 20s. And you go into any agent's room in the country and it's the same faces you'll have seen for 20 years. They just look a bit more haggard. And we are really, we're the last of the dinosaurs. And I don't see how that can change quickly without proper funding.
As you say, Darryl, for you, I remember even as a trainee, the topics of conversation in common rooms were always legal aid and football. And, you know, things have just got progressively worse, but it's at crisis point now, really. So it's time for people to pay attention, for the government to pay attention, and hopefully this action will demonstrate just how bad things have become. So thank you, Darryl, very much. I'm going to come to Lucie now and just ask about the situation. You've heard a bit there from Darryl about what's happening here. Lucie, can you explain to us a little of what is happening south of the border in England and Wales?
Absolutely. Well, can I just start by saying I listened with great interest to what Darryl was explaining there, because so much of what he says resonates with our own experience. And so we also find ourselves, to adopt Darryl's phrase, taking radical action reluctantly, because we share with Darryl the concerns about the impacts on our clients. Defence lawyers don't want to leave clients unrepresented. And we would only be doing this if we were facing, as Darryl explained, an unprecedented crisis, and we are in the same position. Our crisis is both the difficulty of an ageing profile, as Darryl explains, but also we are actively hemorrhaging talent at a rate and speed that the criminal bar of England and Wales hasn't experienced previously. So, and as Darryl explained, it's caused by historical underfunding, which has now gone on for decades. So it's not a crisis short in the making, and it's going to be a crisis that's going to take time to put right. And the issue is funding. So the push factors are the same. And so what are we doing about it? So in January, the Criminal Bar Association, I'm the Secretary of the Criminal Bar Association for England and Wales, we surveyed our members, all of whom are criminal barristers, mainly specialist criminal barristers working within the jurisdiction, about whether they'd be willing to take a type of action that we call no returns. No returns means that we refuse to, or rather withdraw our goodwill in terms of taking on each other's cases at the last minute. I don't know, but I assume in Scotland you have a similar system. When trials overrun or cases get called in at short notice, we will step in to take on that workload at the last minute. And really it's the goodwill that keeps the system operating, and it is goodwill. And over 90% of our membership indicated that they were now at a point where, having regard to the fees that are paid, that particular cohort of work, return work, last minute, high stress work was the cohort of work that they were no longer willing to do. And so in March, we moved to a ballot of the membership, and again, over 90% indicated that they were ready to take that very, very serious step, reluctantly, but because they felt it was necessary. And we take the view as an association that without action and investment, now the criminal justice system down here really is in a perilous state, because the backlog of cases that we have, we already in the last quarter of last year had 240 trials across the jurisdiction, so long before the action began, that couldn't go ahead for want of either prosecution, defence counsel, or both. So that really indicates the scale of the issue we have in terms of not having a big enough workforce to service the work that needs to be covered. And so as of the 11th of April, we withdrew our goodwill, taking care, of course, to adhere very strictly to our own code of conduct in terms of both our justification for that action and the circumstances in which we were taking it. And all of the indicators across all of the circuits in the jurisdiction is that goodwill has now been withdrawn by every criminal barrister. The consequence is that we now have an increasing number of trials being stood out. At the moment, the judges have issued guidance to really facilitate the attendance wherever possible of the instructed advocate, which has mitigated the impact to a degree. But obviously that will only mitigate it for a matter, we anticipate, of weeks. And so all of the time, the impact of the action is mounting. And our demands on government are these. We had an independent review, referred to in short term as the CLAR review, which recommended an immediate increase of 15% on what we call ADFS fees. So there's a defence fees in this jurisdiction. Government haven't acted on that. The review was made public at the end of last year. At the moment, they are indicating, but have taken no action to implement it in October. We have calculated in the interim that the combination of the impact of COVID last year, of course, ever escalating inflation, and the fact that fees have taken enormous cuts in recent years, mean that 15% is not going to be enough to retain, as Darryl says, those at the very bottom of the profession. The people we need to retain are the most junior, who on recent estimates can be earning as little as £12,000 a year. And so, of course, your listeners don't need me to tell them that that is simply unsustainable as a profession going forward. It's going to take a seismic injection of funding to persuade them that they have a future at the criminal bar in England and Wales. And it's imperative that we do persuade them, because these are, of course, the criminal judges of the future in 20-25 years' time. And so we're asking for 25% increase, an effective pay review body, so we don't year on year have to take action to persuade government to fund the system properly, some mechanism for index linking, and particular demands in relation to the written work that we undertake, which both of you will know as practitioners is really the job of the criminal barrister. The work we do is not what we do in court, it's the preparation we do outside of court to keep cases moving. And as Darryl has explained in relation to the cases that the Scottish profession have decided to take action in relation to, it's all of that extraneous work that attaches to particular types of cases where we can expend enormous amounts of time, and at the moment it either isn't remunerated or is insufficiently remunerated. And then finally, we've got particular grievance down here in relation to payments in relation to serious sexual offending. And so our action attaches very much to defence fees, but in recent years we've always seen parity. If ever a gain is made in defence fees, there is usually a similar increase in prosecution fees, but it's defence practitioners who have withdrawn their goodwill, and so we're very much actually in the same position as our Scottish friends, and we stand in solidarity with you, if I can say that. We really do.
Yeah, it sounds as if there are many parallels, and one parallel that stands out is it would seem the apparent refusal of those holding the purse strings to engage or have, sensible discussions. Why, Lucie, do you think that is? Why are we in a situation where those involved in the criminal justice system across the United Kingdom, who are performing an essential public function, because it is, it's not just prosecutors who act in the public interest, it's defence as well. Why is it that they're not being listened to?
Well, I'll avoid, because I'm speaking with my secretary of the CBA hat on, I'll avoid making party political points, and I'll keep it to just a political point. That, as I say, this is a crisis long in the making. It hasn't come about overnight. There seems to be a failure really across the board to understand the critical importance of having an effective defence bar in order to, in an adversarial system, counter the state's allegations against citizens in circumstances where they can be deprived of their liberty. And we consistently communicate the constitutional importance, as you will as well, of that very, very important bedrock of any democracy. Edith, why do people not listen? Why do they not pay attention? It's really difficult to say. My own view is that unless and until people come into the system, either as a defendant or a family member as a defendant, or as a victim or as a witness, they don't appreciate, because we don't have televised proceedings, they don't appreciate the failures in the system. And consistently over the years doing this job, I've seen people being absolutely appalled by what they're faced with when they arrive in our criminal courts. And the biggest issue is delay. It's not a cliche to say justice delayed is justice denied. And that's what we have down here. It becomes a poor imitation of justice if you're trying cases years after the alleged offending took place. And we're now in a position where very serious offences in our jurisdiction, including serious sexual offending, it is tried years later, which deters complainants and increases the risk of injustice. So why won't the politicians listen? I really can't answer that, because they really, really should. I mean, it's absolutely critical that we get this right, and that's why we've been driven. We didn't like Darryl. We don't do this lightly. That's why we've been driven to take the action that we're now taking, really to highlight and draw attention to the issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Darryl, have you any thoughts on why maybe in Scotland that there's been this refusal, denial to take seriously or to sit down and just properly listen to what has been said for a long time?
Doesn't matter what party you represent. Let's face it, money for criminals is never a vote winner. And it strikes me that the entire legal aid budget for the country really is a drop in the ocean, and is not placed on the proper pedestal. I mean, the budget for housing in North Lanarkshire Council roughly equates to the entire legal aid budget. There's a lack of appreciation of how important a properly functioning criminal justice system is to a fair society. And we do not have a fair society. I'm sure Lucie will say the same down south, but we Scots have always been thoroughly proud about being fair and tolerant and understanding. But our society now does not reflect that at all. It's embarrassing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also demoralizing for those who remain in the system, who are trying their best to represent clients, to highlight the difficulties. I'm conscious that this is Mental Health Awareness Week. We've got Jonathan lined up, who's going to be telling us lawyers how we might de-stress and look after ourselves. But here we are discussing how you're trying your best to look after criminal justice systems across the United Kingdom, protect the interests of those who are vulnerable within that. How is that affected, the welfare of solicitors? First of all, Darryl, you, and then we'll come to Lucie about welfare of barristers down south. Darryl, what's morale like amongst solicitors these days?
It's rock bottom. Everybody is exhausted, and we've come out of COVID, and of course there's a backlog, and they're recruiting prosecutors hand over fist. They are appointing sheriff after sheriff after sheriff to try and deal with the backlog, whilst completely ignoring the fact that a trial needs a defence lawyer, and there simply aren't enough of us, and you can't recruit. You advertise for a qualified assistant, and you are met with tumbleweed, and we simply can't cope. And there is no doubt that that has, in recent times, led to tragedy. And there is no light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to our future as a profession. And as I say, we're the last of the dinosaurs. We're going to die out eventually. Will it take that for them to actually do something?
Yeah, which is very, very sad. Lucie, how are things down south? How are you and your colleagues coping with the pressures you've described?
Well, again, what Darryl says resonates, and the short answer is we're not. There's been a sea change, as we all know, in recent years, that younger generations have a grasp of mental health and wellness issues in the way those of us, including my own generation, never had, but are now doing our best to adopt. And as we sort of, this is really the recruitment crisis that we face, because it isn't just about funding, as Darryl says, the pace of the work, the punishing nature of the work, dealing consistently with highly traumatic events, the impact of referred trauma and so on and so forth on the mental health of the professionals that are undertaking that work, means that when you're trying to recruit into the profession, the young lawyers are looking for both quality of life, of wellness, and fees. It's not all about the money. They're looking at and weighing all of those factors. And at the moment, because there are too few of us, again, as Darryl says, we're just trying to service too many cases in order to keep the wheels of justice turning, and that results in a work-life balance which is so skewed that it makes it very difficult to recruit into the profession. And just sort of going back to a point that Darryl touched on earlier, which I just thought was so important in terms of our aspirations to be a fair society, it's absolutely imperative that we have a profession that reflects the society it serves. And so, like you, we want to see in our jurisdiction a diverse profession and a diverse judiciary. We have that at the lower levels, and we find, because of entrenched racism and sexism, to name the obvious discriminators, that falls away in the later years. And it isn't simply about retention. Sometimes it's about overt sexism and racism, but it's also about retaining that diverse cohort all the way through in order that we can promote them. And at the moment, if we can't even recruit them, we can't retain them, and then we end up back in the situation that we're in down here at the moment. We have a disproportionately white and male judiciary, and we want to do something about that. And what we're saying to government, if you won't give us the tools to give them the balance that they need so that we can retain them during the early years, we can't carry them through to that higher level. So it all, I think, sort of all of the issues are important, and they all tie together, and we need to address them all in conjunction.
Yeah, and I think there is a real sense of, I certainly feel it in recent months, and undoubtedly a lot to do with the backlog, but there was a backlog before we had lockdowns. But there's a real pressure to get through business. There's a real pressure on everybody. But when you've got a defence bar who are depleted in numbers, and there's no slack, there's no take up if somebody can't do something, then it's real pressure and stress. And on top of all the things you've discussed, Lucie, the nature of the offences we're dealing with, that work-life balance, and quite frankly, just now, I don't have that. I'm working flat out, and I'm sure you guys are exactly the same, and it has an impact on your mental health. And it's not healthy, because you're not the best person you can be to represent your clients either. You need time to let your brain rest, to move away from your cases, to stop thinking about it, and that's just not possible.
Absolutely. I was shadowed. Sorry to cut a question. I was shadowed by a young lawyer in court today, and I found myself using that precise analogy that if I was going into hospital and the surgeon operating on me had done 6 operations during the course of the night and I was number 7, he's not had adequate preparation time and he was absolutely exhausted, I'd be very reluctant to allow him to operate on me. And yet somehow in the law, we seem to think that that is an appropriate way to organise the profession. And for all of the reasons you've just articulated, it really isn't.
No, it's not. And it's very sad because this was a job. I mean, I teach on diploma at Glasgow University, or I'm a reserve now. I used to do it full time, but it was really encouraging to see young students coming in and they'd maybe take your class. I did the advanced criminal. I think my Wi-Fi is going a bit haywire. Sorry, I think my Wi-Fi is playing up. Am I back? I was just saying I teach on the diploma course, and it was really encouraging because you would have young students and they would maybe pick the criminal advocacy class or the litigation class, but they would say, oh, I don't really want to do that, but I just thought I needed something to fill my timetable. But by the end of it, you would have people that were saying, I really want to do criminal law, and really enthusiastic. And, you know, that talent and that enthusiasm now, tonight's been quite a somber evening just listening to us. There's not a lot of fun here. I'm hoping, no pressure, Jonathan, but you'll need to buoy us up. But, we wouldn't be talking like this even 5 years ago. There was always a positive and it was a worthwhile job and it was interesting work. But now it feels very functional and you're just getting through the work. And I found myself saying the joy's gone out of it, which is very sad. Would you agree with that, Darryl?
We do this job because we're passionate about this job. And lately, it's very difficult to be passionate because, as I say, it crushes you. It's impossible to find the fire within you when you're literally exhausted.
Yeah, absolutely. Lucie, any final thoughts, or is there any positive we can take out of it? I mean, I think the positive is that we're here, we're discussing it. As Darryl's saying, we're passionate about it. We want to fix it. We're prepared to fix it, but we're not necessarily the ones that can fix it. We're trying our best. Any final thoughts, Lucie?
Well, yeah, I mean, to finish on a positive note and going back to the title of your section, are we taking action for positive change? And we're doing it, as Darryl says, because we believe in what we do. And I think that's why we're so exhausted. It's precisely because we're not willing to do half a job on behalf of our clients. We came into it because we believe in the importance of what we do and because we know the value of it and we know that it's critical to a functioning society. And I think that's why we're exhausted. It's because we won't give a second-rate service. We'll only give a first-class service, but we're being asked to do it in circumstances where that exacts a personal toll. So what I'm encouraged by actually is the fact that lawyers, all of us, historically not radical creatures and not inclined to move into the political sphere in order to secure the future of the system that we believe in, are now taking action, and that gives me hope. That gives me hope because there comes a point where I think government has to listen, as long as we're all willing to continue to stand in solidarity and push, and that's what we're doing, north and south of the border. That's what we're doing. So, and I know that's what we'll all continue to do. So I hope government are listening because we're not backing away from the fight.
Yeah, absolutely. Darryl, any final thoughts from you?
One positive of the predicament that we find ourselves in is the fact that the profession has never been more united. And if we can unite in the face of adversity in addressing issues in connection with legal aid, then we can unite in other areas and bring positive change elsewhere. So it's not all bad. No, it's not. Well, listen, thank you so much to both of you. It's been really interesting. It's been, as I say, quite somber, but let's hope that
it just depicts exactly how people are feeling, and I think that this is it. This, as I say, for years you would hear people moaning and grumping, but this is we've come to a point where it's kind of crunch time, and we're looking at legal systems that are in crisis, and let's hope that the actions that you're taking, both solicitors here and barristers down south, will have an impact, and people will listen, and things will change. So thank you both so much for your time. Really great to have you both. You are welcome to stay on and listen to Jonathan, maybe pick up some tips to keep yourselves well. But for now, thank you both, Darryl and Lucie. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Edith.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back to the second part of tonight's social, and I'm delighted to introduce our guest for this section, the wellbeing section, and we're joined by Jonathan Kennett. Hello, Jonathan.
Hello, good evening, Edith. Hello, thank you for having me.
Not at all. It's great to have you on. Thank you for agreeing to come on. Now, I know you've got lots to tell us, but I wonder, Jonathan, obviously you have opened fairly recently the Health Hub, which is in Quarriers Village. And I wonder, could you just tell us a little bit about how that came to be, maybe a bit about your own background, first of all, to how you came to decide to open the Health Hub, and then we can move on to talk about what you offer there, in particular for lawyers. So how did the Health Hub come to be?
Well, thank you, and I'll try and be as brief as possible. I have an engineering background. I did my degree in Napier in Edinburgh in electrical and electronics, and that was, of course, way back. But I ended up starting my own company, and that was successful, and we ended up trading worldwide. It's the engineering business, started from home, and eventually that was sold on to an American multinational called ITW. So that was a big milestone for me. And then I've been involved in running companies, and I've been a founder member of other companies like the Alliance Wine Company, which is now successfully trading around the globe from a humble origin here, also at Quarriers Village, you might be surprised to know.
Okay.
Has 75 staff. And anyway, I'm very proud of that, although I don't deal with that in the day-to-day. So, but what got me interested was back in about 2000, I was diagnosed as being pre-diabetic, and this was a bit of a shock. I've always had a bit of a problem with weight, and I was told this was a condition that would just get worse, and you take some tablets, and you take one tablet. When that stopped working, you take two, and when that stopped working, you'd end up on insulin. I thought, geeks, I'm not ready for this. So I decided to start reading up, and I quickly discovered that there were people who were reversing out of type 2 diabetes by diet and exercise. And I thought, well, that's marvelous. I don't fancy being on medication for the rest of my life. So, and I managed to reverse out of it. And so that got me reading a lot. And I started getting very interested in alternative therapies, because obviously if you read one, they link to another. Yeah. So, and I followed people who I thought were quality based in their information. They typically medical doctors who had also decided to look at alternative therapies and had perhaps moved from a life in medicine into other protocols. And so I followed people like Dr. McCullough in the States, who's very well known and also fighting a big battle with the CDC about vaccines and things. and but a very studied man, and I think does good articles. And also Dr. Berg, who does a lot of things, and so a lot of wide. And I read avidly, and then in 2017, I had a mild heart attack, and I ended up after the event going for rehab in the RAH in Glasgow, and in Paisley, that is. And I saw a lot of people there who were a lot sicker than I was. And I remembered I'd read about exercise with oxygen therapy, and the marvelous things it could do. So I imported a kit from a company in Colorado called Live O2, and I set it up in my garage, and the impact it had on my health was just amazing. So, and of course I would talk about this, and a friend's father was very poorly, a man who'd had, I think, several two triple bypasses, and had really come to the end of the trail. He was 50 meters walking. He was getting a lot of chest pains, and the surgeons couldn't do anything for him. So I said, well, why don't you come and see what can happen with some oxygen? So we warmed up for a bit, and after 2.5 minutes, he said, I have to stop. And then we put on the oxygen mask, which is 95% pure oxygen. And 15 minutes later, he emerged, pinked up, and totally flabbergasted that he managed to do all of this without any pain. So
Wow.
I was just blown away by this experience, and I decided, well, this is something which needs to get out to a wider audience and is not available on the NHS, and why isn't it? And things came together from there.
Yeah. And I think, Jonathan, traditionally, as you say, as you're going back to your diabetes diagnosis, traditionally, the care or healthcare you get is take these tablets and get on with it, and things will get worse, but just keep taking the tablets, as it were. So you clearly have had personal experience of, that side of things, but then looking at it from a different angle and deciding and determining that you will address it in another way. So you're coming at it from experience. You're not just someone who's saying, I've got this great thing, have a shot because it's meant to be really good. You've actually put a bit of work into it, haven't you?
I have. There's everything that all the therapies in the Health Hub I have personally experienced and tried, and I wouldn't be recommending anything which I hadn't tried. And so we're very proud that the therapies at the Health Hub are they're drug-free, they're non-addictive, and there's no side effects. So it's a comfortable way to go forward, because if you're an engineer, you join the dots up differently from if you're a drug-based medical professional, and it takes you to some very interesting and some very useful places. And matters of pain control and things, we have some wonderful therapies that work in 10-15 minutes, and people are quite amazed by them sometimes.
Yeah. So we'll come to talk about the therapies in just a moment, but in terms of the Health Hub itself, which is set in a beautiful building in Quarriers Village, which itself, for those who don't know, is a conservation village. But you've kitted that out. You've taken over quite a large space, and it's you've designed a purpose-built health hub which houses all these different therapies that we'll talk about in a minute. Did you see? Well, you clearly did see a need for it, but who is it you're focused on, or is there a particular group, or is it for anyone?
Well, as I've got older, I've begun to realise that things start to creak a bit, and so my sympathies and my empathy is with probably the older generations. We're focused on health very much, and pain relief, and just giving people more energy and helping with any area that seems to be lacking. And as we know, we're all in our own forest and we can't see the trees. No pun there, Edith. And,
no, absolutely.
So we would help people with sports injuries, of course, but our primary objective is for chronic conditions and helping people who have come to the end of using drugs as pain relief and so on, and need to move on to something more sustainable.
Yeah. And we know, Jonathan, that a lot of conditions come from stress as well. And obviously you've I think you were listening into the discussions that took place before, quite
Yeah.
a morbid discussion, and you can see how we as lawyers are stressed, and we're in need of a bit of care for ourselves. So can you maybe talk a little about how stress affects the body?
Absolutely. I was profoundly struck by the daunting picture that Darryl and Lucie were painting for us, and thinking just that this is a situation that is bigger than the individuals who are the players in the field here, and trying to attract government attention is a completely different issue. It's so important, but how to do that? So I'm obviously not equipped to talk about that side of it, but I do think that this is therefore more about personal survival as much as anything else. And because if you, as a lawyer, if your health collapses, then you're no use to anybody. So actually, when you look at it, whether it's at a personal level or a business level or a family level, if you don't have your health, they say health isn't everything, but everything is nothing without it. So I think that's just a thought there. So yes, it's a daunting picture, but I know we intuitively know about stress and when we feel stress, and it probably might be useful to try and look at, well, what's happening inside us when we do get stressed, if that's appropriate. And because if we understand what the issues are, and going back to the Health Hub, we try to get to the cause of things and not just put a Band-Aid on the top of it. So a little bit of education is rather important to understand what's at play here. And really, the things that are affecting stress are basically the only three variables in life, the sort of headings, which is nutrition, exercise, and sleep quality. These are the big things. So it's easy to say those things, but what is it? And one of the things I was reflecting on in anticipating of having a chat with you was that stress is a feeling. It's not the event itself. And I think it's important to recognize that it's how we manage feelings that if we see them as separate from the whatever's instigating the stress, the stressor, then it gives us a license to do something about it, because we say, well, let me deal with my feelings, because I can't deal with the stress, but I can deal with my feelings. And it opens the door to say, well, maybe we can look at some mind management and maybe search for some therapies that are relaxing to us. So I rather hung on to that. I was thinking, stress is fear-based, isn't it? And so we're fearsome of something. We're fearsome of not meeting a deadline. We're fearsome of not having enough money. We're fearsome, whatever it is. And I rather like the saying that fear is an acronym for false expectations appearing real. And I think someone on their deathbed said, I had a lot of troubles in my life, but most of them didn't happen. So not to be too flip about this, but I also have a little postcard in my office. I don't know if you can see this, but I thought that is quite good. And when you think about it, worry is a misuse of your imagination, because you can just get into a little cycle of repeating the stress factor, and all that does is create a constant elevated level of stress hormones and so on. So I hope we're okay for time, are we, Edith?
We are. We're doing fine for time.
Okay.
And just I mean, these are key things, and I know sleep in particular. And if you're stressed, you're not going to sleep, and if you don't sleep, you're going to get more stressed, and it's a kind of vicious circle, isn't it? So I wonder, Jonathan, might we move on just to understand a bit more about Health Hub and what therapies you have there, what in particular they address, and just promote your wonderful business a bit.
Yeah. Well, okay. So so the problem is with when you get stressed, and the context of the Health Hub seems to make more sense if we know what we're dealing with on the stress front. So stress is producing this huge release of cortisol and adrenaline, which, if it's constant all the time, that is a fight or flight stress. And in a normal situation, if that ended up in a physical altercation, you'd burn off those hormones and you'd go back to a more level or relaxed state. So these hormones cause damage at a cellular level, and the therapies in the Health Hub address cell health, and they particularly they help the mitochondria, which are in the center of every cell in your body, and especially in places like your heart and muscles. They help the mitochondria make energy, and if we haven't got energy, then we are feeling low, we're feeling depressed, and ultimately these hormones can wreck the energy forming efforts of the mitochondria. So that's what we're trying to deal with. So you can do that. You can help the mitochondria with light, believe it or not, infrared light, special frequencies. Light is amazing. Light is photons. Light end up creating little electrons, which then provide the electric power to drive our cells. So people just think light is light, but light goes into your body and changes your physiology. We also have pulse magnetic therapy, which is known as PEMF, and pulse electromagnetic therapy, and that is very far-reaching because it penetrates all the cells in the body, and the result of that is it also charges up the cell membrane. Every cell has a membrane around it, a bit like an eggshell, and that has a voltage on it. And if that voltage gets low, the cells start to stop functioning, because that battery in the cells is what brings in the oxygen and potassium and all the things needed for combustion and drives out the products of combustion, just like a car engine has an exhaust. So low battery power, cells don't work well, they get clogged up, they get fatigued, and ultimately you get fatigued. And that applies to whether it's your muscles or your brain or wherever, or your skin. So, you know.
I was just going to ask you about that, Jonathan, because I've tried a couple of your therapies, one being the electromagnetic therapy. So explain a little bit about what's involved in that.
Okay, so it's a wonderful therapy because you can do it, you can be fully clothed, because magnetism goes through all tissues, bones, blood, everything. And basically there's a box which creates an electric current pulse into a coil, which then produces a magnetic field, and the magnetic field the coil can be put on your shoulder if you've got a problem with your shoulder, perhaps a frozen shoulder or tennis elbow or something, or on an injury, or on the top of a wound after an operation. So it's hugely helpful for wound healing and things. But then these magnetic pulses go into you, and they create tiny micro currents, and nerves respond and muscles twitch, which are involuntary. It's a painless process, non-invasive and non-addictive, and people come out of it feeling relaxed and so on. You may remember your own experience following that, Edith.
Yeah, and as you say, it doesn't take very long. You don't have to prepare yourself for it. You just pop in, sit down. I sat in a mat and had some strange feelings in my abdominal muscles, but that told me that things must have been, something was working. So that's a very simple thing, and I think you've seen some really incredible results from that, particularly with injuries and
amazing, and great for swelling and bruising and pain relief, and it's very, very quick. The session is for 30 minutes, and people come in with a frozen shoulder they've had for 3 months, and they walk out with increased mobility with that and less pain. So that is terribly rewarding, to be able to provide that for people whose mobility has been affected. So talking about cells, they do also suffer from long-term toxic influences like heavy metals. And unfortunately, we all assimilate heavy metals, and lead's one of them. And those of us of a certain age have been brought up in houses with lead pipes, and it just accumulates and accumulates. And also iron accumulates in us, and that creates problems for older people. So we have detoxing in our health hub, and so we have infrared saunas, which again, the infrared penetrates and produces a deeper perspiration, and it's a great way of getting rid of toxins. So people like to combine, sometimes people will have some magnetic therapy. The magnetic therapy does wonders on the blood cells, because blood cells have got iron in them, and iron is very responsive to magnetism, as we all know from our school days of practicing with iron filings and things. So, and anyway, so if you have some magnetic pulse therapy, and then you have some oxygen therapy, and then you end up with an infrared sauna, you've really given your body a whole workout. You've had some great exercise. You've oxygenated all the cells in your body, and your repair starts kicking in, and things that were a bit cronky start to work again. I had somebody the other day who had kemotheraapy after breast cancer, and had neuropathy in her hands, and when she'd been on the exercise with oxygen therapy, all of a sudden all her fingers and toes were tingling again, and this is life coming back. It's extraordinary, the conditions that can be helped.
Yeah, I was going to mention the oxygen therapy because that's the other one that I tried, and that's where I ran on a treadmill with a mask stuck to my face and a big bag of oxygen above me. And I'm not someone that enjoys running on a treadmill at all. So after about 5 or 6 minutes, I'm usually ready to get off. But what I found with the oxygen was after 5 or 6 minutes, I wanted to go faster. I felt as if I had loads of energy and I was sprinting along. And I don't know how much of the bag I used, but I think I was certainly breathing in lots of it. And I felt great. Well, immediately after it, I felt great. About an hour later, I felt absolutely exhausted, but in a good way, in a restful way. I felt as if I'd been, my body had received something very good in the form of the oxygen. So again, is the oxygen therapy something that can help de-stress lawyers or?
Definitely. Just exercise, because when you exercise, you burn off all the rubbish that you may have eaten, bad oils and things. And we could get on to some of the nutritious stuff if there was any time, but all the rubbish ends up in your cells, and when you exercise, it burns off. You oxygenate the cells, so that's a great thing, and you recharge your membrane potential on the cell. So there's an awful lot happening when you exercise, and it doesn't have to be very much. It could just be a brisk walk on a regular basis, and it improves your mood as well, because stress hormones affect your mood, as we know.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that I certainly find, as you were talking about the cortisol and the hormones, and when you're stressed and you're just keeping going, your body manages to do that. But when you stop, that's when you find you get ill. So a visit to the health hub, a few therapies may repair things before the body enters into that kind of, I suppose, repairing itself. It's probably saying, look, you've had enough cortisol and now it's time for me to relax. The other thing I wanted to, I'm just conscious of the time, Jonathan, but something that I think viewers, lawyers might be interested in, and I'm going to pronounce it incorrectly, so you can correct me. Is it cryotherapy?
Yes, we have a unit which is for local cryotherapy. And in a matter of fact, I made a mistake. I was demonstrating it. There's a beautiful face mask with special LED lights in it. And I had a blast on this showing some young lady this afternoon. So I'm a bit puce, but I've not been drinking or anything. I just a cryofacial. But it's a wonderful therapy. It works very locally. And when you have, for example, you have arthritic hands or sore joints and things, it is almost miraculous how after only a 3-minute session of super cooling your tissues around the affected area, to a very controlled temperature, somewhere between 2 and 5 degrees. You don't freeze because you don't want to have a frostbite. But this has a fantastic effect on the blood flow, and all sorts of things kick in underneath. So it helps skin conditions and rashes and so on. So very good for pain control and those sorts of things.
Yeah, somebody got quite excited about. I was talking to them about the Health Hub, and they were saying, "Oh, they've got that cryotherapy that I've seen on. I don't know if it was Housewives of Orange Country or something, or Orange County, sorry. But it seems to be quite a popular thing in the States, and I think that's true of most of your therapies. There may be more available over there, but certainly in Scotland, yours is the only hub or facility that I'm aware of that has all of these things under one roof. And certainly when I've been up and I've spoken to you, Jonathan, and as you said tonight, the idea is perhaps to mix and match some of the therapies, and most of them need a bit of a course to benefit from them. But you have lots of therapies there, and it's not just like going along to, a spa for a bit of a jacuzzi or a sauna. These are really innovative that target specific areas of the body and really benefit the body. So yeah, I think lots of our viewers will be very interested to pop along and try, and you're very open to people just coming for a chat. It's a very friendly place to come to.
Yeah. Yes, we wanted to have that kind of atmosphere, and the team is growing. We have 2 resident osteopaths, and we have a massage therapist, and all becoming very popular. And people have one therapy, and then they say they'll have a go with a light bed experience, and that adds to the overall experience. And generally, people are leaving in a better place than when they arrive. And of course, we are available. So a lot of times people are unable to get to see their GPs. We've had quite a number of people with breathing difficulties, long COVID and things, and we've been able to do some quite useful work with those kind of problems with our exercise with oxygen. So it's been very good.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a great facility, and it would be great. It's a lovely place to visit. So I would encourage people to go along. And in terms of your osteopathy, am I right in thinking that you also, I might be completely wrong, but I thought you did some animal osteopathy as well. Is that right? Or...
Well, one of our lady osteopaths, Julia Scott, she's been in osteopathy for I think 20-something years, and she has a penchant for horses, and some people bring their pets to the one part of the hub that's sort of sectioned off, and she can help them, and she gives them red light therapy, a mobile device of that, and sometimes and pets respond great to magnetic pulse therapy. They like to go and lie on a mat if there's one available, and just soak it all up. So it's very energizing and very restful. So,
absolutely. Yeah. Well, I need to get out. Ironically, I've not been back because I've been working so much, but that needs to stop being so intense, and I need to get up and try some more therapies, which I will, because there are a number that I've identified I do want to try. But Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on tonight. That's really given, I'm sure, our viewers lots of food for thought, and even coming to Quarriers Village itself is a nice day trip to come and experience the village and the surroundings. But a visit to the Health Hub is a must. Come and see what Jonathan and his team can offer in terms of reducing stress, improving health, and general well-being. So, Jonathan, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Edith, it was a pleasure. And may I just say that I think the Health Hub aside, I think that really what needs a bit more time, another occasion perhaps, would be to talk about nutrition and things, because these are the things, that active things that anybody can do that will make a difference. And they're simple things. They're not necessarily easy, but they are simple, and because they involve some changes to habits. And if anybody would like a few simple notes on that, I'd be I don't know if they can contact you, but I'd be happy just to put some suggestions or send them off on an email or something. So feel free.
That's very kind, Jonathan. And yes, we will. If you send me them, we can get those sent out to anyone that's that's interested. So thank you for that. That's very kind of you too. So thank you again, Jonathan, and really interesting. And we've come to the end of our Hey Legal Social for this evening. So thank you to all of our guests, to our sponsors, and of course to you, the viewers, for watching. We hope that you enjoyed it. We certainly ended on a positive, but some really interesting and important matters discussed tonight. So I hope you all join us next time, and meantime, take care, and we will see you soon. Thank you again.